All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back on 99 Media. Today, there's with me Paolo, and we've got a useful guest of the show, a friend of the show, Michael Roberts. Thank you, Michael, for being with us today. And thank you,
Thanks for
Paolo.
inviting me as well. It's
Thank
good to be
you.
back.
So today we wanted to discuss the topic of crypto, but which we hope we will manage to clarify slightly for the viewers. And so the interest in the topic is really quite big recently, and ultimately this interview stems from the fact that in July the so-called Genius Act was passed into legislation by Donald Trump. And this Genius Act largely legislates on the topic of stablecoins. So as a first question, Michael, I wanted to ask you, could you clarify the difference between proper cryptocurrencies, such as Bitcoin, and stablecoin? Because normally in the media, they are all labeled under the same label as cryptocurrencies. But hopefully in our discussion, we will show you that there's really quite big differences between the two. So if you could open up with these, it would be great. Thank you.
Okay, well, guys, cryptocurrencies are obviously the new exciting thing which developed in the last 20 years when a Japanese programmer came up with the idea that you could carry out transactions in a decentralized way, computer to computer, and you wouldn't have to do transactions using money or any other commodity by going through a bank or through the government to make your transaction, which is the normal procedure. When your weekly wage comes in, your salary comes in, it goes into the bank usually, and therefore it becomes a deposit in the bank. And therefore you have to use the bank deposits that you have to buy things and so on and take loans from the bank. Well, cryptocurrency was a great new idea. We could get away from state currencies. People could make their own transactions and reach an agreement on the value of those transactions by inventing a digital currency, which would be valued through transactions between computers in a decentralized way. And this Japanese developer said also there's a limit on how many Bitcoins or other cryptocurrencies that you can produce. The computer algorithm used reaches a limit, and that means that the basis of these currencies will continue to increase in value over a period of time as they are increasingly used. So this was supposed to be a very exciting thing. A lot of people thought this is great. We're going to get, we're no longer under the control of the state. It will be a free opportunity to develop technology and the freedom movement of individuals to make their own decisions over their own lives rather than being dominated by the state, the banks, the central banks, and their state currencies. But of course, unfortunately, it hasn't turned out to be an alternative currency, all these cryptocurrencies. There are now 1,000 or so different ones. The most well-known one is Bitcoin, one of the earliest ones. It has the biggest amount of holdings by individuals compared to all the others, but there are thousands of cryptocurrencies, these decentralized currencies, which people can buy and sell accordingly if they go to the sites which advertise them or offer them. And the idea now that cryptocurrencies will replace state currencies has turned out, of course, not really to be true. We still have dollars, we still have euros, we still have yen, we still have British pounds. Most people still operate all their major monetary transactions, the smallest to the largest, through those state currencies. However, there has been an increasing attempt to try and drive up cryptocurrencies as an alternative. But I would say bluntly, what we've got now through the cryptocurrencies and like Bitcoin is not an alternative money, not an alternative currency to the state, but another form of speculative investment that investors who have got the money and retail investors, individuals like ourselves who feel they want to, as it were, make a bet, to go for a punt on see if they can get more money. They could invest in the stock market, they could invest in bonds, they could invest in art, they could invest in all sorts of commodities which presumably have some rarity value, but they can now also invest in cryptocurrency. The advantage of being with cryptocurrency is that you can do it on your computer immediately and systematically attempt to get a gain. So if the Bitcoin price rises from, it's now currently around about $120,000 per Bitcoin. Notice it's still measured in dollars because that's what matters, but it's now 120,000 compared to say 5,000 3 or 4 years ago. Huge increase. So if you bought your Bitcoin and held Bitcoins 5 or 6 years ago, you would now be massively rich. But of course, during that period of 5 years, the Bitcoin has gone up and it's gone dramatically down and up again, which means you can't possibly use it for ordinary transactions. It's just a speculative investment, an asset like all those other ones. Now, what's happened recently, well, in the last few years, is that people realize that it's just a speculative asset and it's still not something you can actually do to buy loads of commodities, whether you want to buy property, whether you want to buy, invest in something else, whether you just want to carry out normal monetary transactions. You need to convert those digital cryptocurrencies back into state currencies like the dollar or the euro. How can you do that relatively easily? Well, that's the idea of a stablecoin. A stablecoin, companies have come forward and said, we'll take your Bitcoin and we'll value that Bitcoin at a certain price, in which term we'll take the Bitcoin and we'll give you dollars for it. We'll give you euros for it. So in effect, they act as a sort of bank to make a transaction between the cryptocurrency into a state currency. And they're called stable coins, rather ironically, because apparently what they offer is stable. You can be sure and safe that you'll get your dollars, you'll get your euros if you buy or sell cryptocurrency through a stable coin company. The biggest one is called Tether, Tether. It's tethered to, the point is that the digital currency as a coin is now tethered to the dollar. So you can get your dollars that way through these companies. But these companies are very risky things also to have been invested in, because they back up. Where do they get their dollars from to buy the Bitcoins that you might have? They get them from having some cash, which investors have given them, or from buying treasury bills, US treasury bills or other bills, the government bills, which are almost as good as money, but not quite. They're commercial bills. And that backs up their assets in case there's a run on people demanding the sale of all their crypto coins that the stable coin has, and conversion into dollars. Because if a load of people have got crypto coins with a stable coin company and they suddenly want all their placed in state currency, in dollars or euros, then there's a massive run on the stable coin's ability to cover those things, just like a bank would have if there was a massive run on deposits. And Tether really got into trouble a few years ago because it was quite close to not being able to meet the obligations set for it when there was a big move to get out of cryptocurrencies back into real currencies. So what has happened in the last month or so, as you say, is an attempt to try and stabilize stable coins. It's saying that we're going to introduce an act. The Americans have introduced an act called the Genius Act, odd name, but the idea is that now stable coins will be regulated. So all these funds will be regulated. They'll have to show they've got enough backing in terms of dollars and other assets, commercial bills, to ensure that they can meet any runs that people might have if they want to switch out of their cryptocurrencies, whatever they are, into dollars or other currencies. So they're supposedly regulated. Now, you might say, well, that's a good thing. So everything's solved now. We've got stable coins which are going to be regulated by the government. What's wrong with that? Well, what's behind this, of course, is not really an attempt to regulate this speculative asset so that it doesn't destroy people's lives and money and livelihoods or bring about a financial collapse. It's really designed to actually open up the cryptocurrency market much wider than it's been up to now. People have been reluctant to go beyond this speculative asset in a private sector, but now it's saying if there's a run on the cryptocurrencies and on stable coins, the government will back it up, just like they did in 2008 over derivatives, mortgage derivatives, and so on, when we had the banking crash. So the government will have to come in and save these stable coin companies if there's a run. So in effect, cryptocurrency has now been brought under state protection, not to control their speculative activities, but to bail them out if something goes wrong. So that's really what's behind these new developments. So far from it being a sign that cryptocurrency, which is basically a speculative asset, basically one that's been used in fraud and criminality for the last 10 or 15 years, and is now being used by various big wigs like Trump, who's got his own stable coin. You can buy his stable coin, which has various names attached to it, and his son's stable coin and his wife's stable coin. They've all got different stable coins, and you can buy these, and now they're protected by the state if they go bust. So that's what's really behind these recent developments.
Can I just follow up one thing, Paolo? Then I will leave mic to you. No, just because I fully understand how stablecoin can be used as a way to basically trade bitcoins. But if we go back and think of, first of all, I totally agree with the idea that bitcoins are a speculative asset, because it's also a planned, it's a scarcity by design type of currency. So the moment people start feeling that demand is going to be stable because supply is limited and actually decreasing because of the mechanism of the halving, you can expect these things to go up. So we could think of cryptocurrencies as Bitcoin as fulfilling the so-called function of money as a store of value.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the stable coins, the way I understood them, besides what you just said, is trying to fulfill the function of the means of payment, because they are fully backed. It's just another way, basically, to trade in dollars in a way. So I was kind of like thinking, which type of actors might have interest in, on one hand, using stable coins, and then later I would also want to ask you what's the interest of the issuer. And I had got two things in mind. On one hand, there could be retail demand. So if you think about a platform such as Amazon, maybe they could have their own stable coin, price everything in stable coin on Amazon. I mean, Zuckerberg tried to do that with Libra a few years ago, and the financial sector shut him down. So on one hand, there might be this retail interest, but on the other, what I think is more concerning is the fact that, let's say, foreign capital that might be facing capital restrictions in terms of transferring value out of their currencies might do that by using stable coin. So basically, it's an attempt against third country sovereignty by allowing comprador bourgeoisie to have a loophole around capital controls. Would you say that these things might be some important points or not?
I agree with you, Carlo. I think those are other sides of this, all this speculative maneuvering that's going on here. And for example, Milei in Argentina was very keen on such cryptocurrency stablecoin transactions that you've talked about as a means by which they might be able to, companies might be able to avoid any capital controls, and also to bring in funds from abroad to help his regime in terms of the currency of the peso, by bringing in supplies of crypto coin that can be converted on a stable coin basis into pesos. That so far really hasn't done too much, but that's the sort of thing behind it. Another aspect of it is that the American government sees this as an opportunity. If they can make crypto coin, as it were, respectable, all these cryptocurrencies respectable, then there's an opportunity for people to expand their investments into treasury bills and bonds, because they're through a stablecoin process. If you put your current cryptocurrency into a stablecoin company, that company will buy more treasuries on treasury bills in order to cover the value of that cryptocurrency. And so there'll be extra demand for US treasury bills. And as we know, the US government is now running a huge annual deficit on its budget, something like 6 to 7% of GDP, which has to be financed by borrowing. Rather than printing money, they prefer to issue treasury bills, which is not quite the same as money, but is a short-term form of lending, of getting a loan. And they can do that if stablecoins are increasing their supply of purchase of those, demand for those things, because of the cryptocurrency market coming in as an extra form of demand beyond the existing demand for treasury bonds. So these are all ways in which the cryptocurrency market, and connected through the stablecoin, is trying to help the Trump government in particular, and also other governments who see this as a way of perhaps obtaining extra funds out of the public, which they otherwise wouldn't be able to achieve.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Connected to this, I have a very layman kind of question.
Yeah.
So, a premise. Since we started doing these videos together, my friends here in Singapore, I know a lot of Europeans who are in F&B and in other businesses think that I'm some kind of economic guru, which I'm not. So they ask me, what should we invest into? And I've been thinking about this question, right? Not because I want to give them an answer, but because I wonder, where does this question come from? And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that the question comes out of the fear generated from 2008 and whatever has followed. Namely, no matter where you put your money, unless it is gold or land or real estate, in which case you freeze your money, right? In a way, there is no secure investment. So many people have started to look at cryptocurrencies first, Bitcoin, and now increasingly so with the stable coin, as the secure investment solution, so to say. But based on what you've been saying, on the one hand, this is nothing but another scheme whereby the oversized economy of state, I would say in English, money that is invested in state debt, is going to be fed, right? And is another way, hence, to siphon in money from small, medium investors into a market that otherwise, per se, because it doesn't produce anything, wouldn't hold. Am I right to think that? In other words, am I right to think that at the end of the day, the stable coin thing, linked as it is to Bitcoin and linked as it is to an exhausted dollar based economy, is a further scheme to keep up, to use a brutal expression, to keep up a corpse?
Yes. Well, you could say, Paolo, I mean, I think behind the cryptocurrency craze, which it is at the moment, and also the stable coins, is a fear. I think you're right. It's a fear that the financial sector and all these other financial assets that people feel they have to invest in, your friends, your contacts say, what do I invest in? Implying they've actually got cash to invest, but we'll leave that aside. But they've got money to invest in, but they're fearful of investing, say, in the stock market or in other sorts of credits or debt instruments, because of what's happened in the past, the collapse of the stock market, the financial crash, and so on. And they're also fearful of keeping their money in cash, which obviously is very safe in one sense, but inflation eats that away. So we've had big rises in inflation over the last 3 years since the end of the pandemic. So generally prices are 20% above on average where they were at the end of the pandemic. So that's a big inflationary increase, and people are worried that that might continue eating away into their cash. So I've got to get some return on my cash. But what's a safe way to do it? Well, up in the past, the safe way was you put your money into government bonds or treasury bills. That's a shorter term bond, or into euro bonds, or into the Italian bond market, and you get an interest rate from the government. And the government surely is that's about the safest debtor that you could give money to, because they're not going to go bust. But even now, there's a certain fear that that's not going to be the case in the future with the rise in deficits, particularly in the US. And the US dollar has been coming down in the last 3 months since Trump came into office. So as a result, it seems that holding money in dollar cash is not so attractive. And also the level of deficit which the Trump administration is now running would mean you had further pressures on the interest. It could be the bonds that the issuance will lose their value. So if you hold a bond, even though if you get good interest on it, the value of that bond when you come to trying to sell it to somebody else will be reduced. So is there another way that we can make a good return without having these worries, these fears? And so cryptocurrencies become an idea in the minds of a number of retail investors. That's individual investors as opposed to the big companies. The big companies are taking advantage of this. They may invest in cryptocurrencies as well, but they want to be the bookmakers in this. They want to be the people making the transactions. They'll set up cryptocurrencies galore all over the place. They'll set up stablecoin funds themselves in order to attract this money, and then they will be able to make quite a killing on anything that comes in by that way. But this is, as you say, Paolo, is a new investment opportunity or alternative to the traditional investments. It's highly beneficial in some circumstances. The returns could be high, or there could be a massive collapse. That's what makes it very speculative compared to government bonds, or even people used to go into gold rather than dollars because that was safe. But gold doesn't earn any interest. It's just like a big lump of metal cash. It's safe. It's secure. It increases in value in relation to dollars if currencies are going down in their value. But it's not like it's not a solution to the investment problem indefinitely. Cryptocurrency or a digital currency, or some people call it digital gold because it's an alternative to gold, but it's in digital form. And perhaps that's a way to look after your investments. But all this, viewers, is just more of the speculative mess that capitalism gets into in the financial sector as people search for better returns, better profits by looking for all kinds of things which don't require producing anything, don't require providing a service. They're not productive in that sense. They're merely the buying and selling of various products or financial assets in the hope that it will make more money out of money. There was a recent article by the Citi Bank of US who said that what the advantage is of digital currencies like Bitcoin is the following, that when it goes up, then people can sell it and get more for it. And when it goes down, they lose money and they don't get so much for it. Well, a brilliant observation. Doesn't make any sense. It's very simple to say that. But what they really mean is that what you're engaged in is simply a process of buying and selling and trying to get more money out of it rather than the other person. So somebody's going to lose, you're going to gain. And that's what all this operation is. It's not about producing any new value for society or even for the organizations which might go into production. So it's the financial basis of what we Marx call fictitious capital. It's fictitious, it's unreal.
Yeah. And if I can add to that, I mean, this from a, let's say, to use a big word, from a philosophical, speculative in the sense of philosophical perspective. If we look at money, right? We know that money is the universal equivalent, right? So I can exchange anything for, say, £10 because I know that £10 are worth, I don't know, a steak or 3 candies or you name it, right?
And it's accepted by everybody. That's the point.
Yes, and it is universal in the sense that it's accepted by everybody everywhere, right? At least within the confines of a state. All right, fine. And the understanding there is that there is some kind of objective value to it. Now, the moment that these bitcoins, of whichever form, make it explicit that the value is just what we say the value is, where is the possibility of exchange gonna go? Namely, I exchange something with you for gold, say, or for pounds, or for euros, because I have the reasonable trust that the euros or pounds you're gonna give me are worth what I'm gonna give you. And this something that I'm gonna give you is something that I've produced or that is in my possession, be it a watch, be it a car, be it you name it, right? But the moment we make it explicit that in the end, behind money, there is nothing intrinsically valuable aside from what we say the thing is worth, isn't there the risk that the whole mechanism is going to collapse on itself?
Absolutely. That's exactly the point. I mean, Carlo made the point that he gave an example, which is a good one to consider the opposite side of things. What if Amazon has a cryptocurrency and you can pay everything from Amazon in this Amazon currency, and Amazon will refund you in the Amazon currency? So it's like a private currency. So all the you can do lots of transactions through Amazon for the goods and things that you need, and you just have the Amazon currency. And the first question to ask here is, yes, but you can't use that Amazon currency anywhere else. You can only use it with Amazon. So it's a bit like getting a voucher at your supermarket to purchase something else at a discount or whatever, and it's only available at that supermarket or at that service center or that Amazon. It's not a universal currency, a money. It's merely a sort of voucher system for that particular company. Of course, companies like Amazon and Facebook are huge companies, so that there's a lot of transactions that could take place within those companies. JP Morgan, for example, wants to set up a Morgan currency, which its customers can buy and sell assets within JP Morgan's, but in the Morgan currency. Now, the question anybody else will ask is, what happens if I don't really want to keep my money in Amazon currency anymore? How do I transfer it to something that is universally accepted, that perhaps Amazon can't supply me with, like a dollar or a euro? Then I have to go through a transaction process with a fund like stablecoin to get that back into dollars. So it's not a money, it's not universal value. It's a specific thing, these sorts of cryptocurrencies, and they don't provide universal transactions for people in the way that we consider money. And once you make that switch in stablecoin fund to a dollar or something, you're going to pay a big transaction cost. Transaction cost to transfer from Bitcoin to a dollar is quite high. So you're losing a bit of money to be allowed to make that transaction cost. And then there's also no guarantee that the crypto coin price is not moving around so much that your dollar gain will be lost as a result of making that transaction. So these are esoteric ways in the minds of people who think they're going to make a lot of money. And some people do, just like you do in the lottery, but most people don't.
Can I go back to I'm a little bit obsessed with the political economy of who gains from the stable coin. So even if we just let's just assume that this becomes a way for big platforms to have forms of private money within their platforms. So like what Zuckerberg tried to do. I've got a question later on the effect on the Fed, but I don't want to spoil it. But my question is, what is the interest of the issuer of the stablecoin? Because, for example, in the previous example, we said, okay, in terms of the users, we could have people from abroad that want to transfer funds, let's say, towards the American market into dollars via stablecoin, or the retail practicality of having a wallet already in the platform-based stablecoin. Let's just pretend for a moment that stablecoin is not a bridge towards Bitcoin. It's just the money that you have to use on Amazon.
Yeah.
My question is why Amazon is doing it, and the point is, are they extracting value from the state via the interest that they get paid on the collateral? Because to me, it looks like a scalable business whereby if you are a big platform and say you have got an outstanding mass of liquidity, say a couple of $1 trillion, and they have to be collateralized, if 80% is in treasury bonds, well, that's a lot of value that you're sucking out of the state. Is that something that you think might be also behind the interest of the stablecoin guys, big platform capitalists?
Well, I think the first thing is that, like Amazon, if Amazon has an Amazon currency, you can make transactions with Amazon in the Amazon currency, and you can build up credit with Amazon currency. This is a very cheap way for Amazon to make transactions. They don't have to worry about the movement of the dollar or the euro, because everything is just in their private world. And they are also then in total control of what you can get for your Amazon currency. They can vary the price in Amazon currency for the goods and things that they're providing in the transactions. Presumably, they would try to offer them at a lower price relative to having to buy them in dollars or euros. But this will be a very, very efficient and cheap way for them to bring in their customers, keep their customers, build up their customers, and in that way control and expand their market. So I can see the value of that. What is it? The issue is always that people aren't just going to buy things in Amazon. They want to buy things elsewhere. They want to sell things elsewhere. They want to take loans. Taking a loan in Amazon currency is no good, because all you can do with Amazon currency is to buy more Amazon promoted goods. So that's not a solution if you've got something else that you've got in mind. So it requires other areas for people to move, and it's not, because it's not a universal equivalent, not a money as Paolo has explained, then it's not really in a position to substitute for state-run currencies. Now, you raise the extra point about, well, is this in some way that an opportunity for them to, as it were, suck money out of the state? Well, maybe. Obviously, if they're actually, they don't have to worry about on the Amazon currency thing about whether it can be transferred into some other currency. What they would have to worry about, of course, is that they still have to buy things that they put on the Amazon sites in other currencies. So they've got to have some backing in other currencies to make those purchases, because Amazon currency can't be converted except with Amazon customers. So there is still that divide between the universal equivalent of money, dollars, euros, gold, and so on, and the digital currencies. And within that is the role of the state. And this seems to be an opportunity by which perhaps state funding, state treasury bills can be used as a way in which they could expand their business by building those up as reserves, which they have massive amounts of cash, the Magnificent Seven, huge amounts of cash. A lot of it they are now investing in artificial intelligence, data centers, and all the rest of it. But they're also borrowing money in dollars and so on in order to do that. So there is a huge movement in the fiat currencies by which they could balance that against a private currency, which they can develop. They will again reduce their costs and shift some of the burden of these investment processes onto the customers.
And the last question is, in case, say, not obviously tomorrow, but in the space of a few years, we go towards this world where big cloud platforms do have their own forms of private money. Wouldn't that mean that then the very possibility for the central bank to conduct monetary policy would be impacted, because you would have less capacity to ultimately? It's already hard without having competing currencies to influence money supply, because monetarism is not really that simple. But in case quite a lot of liquidity is out of the dollar, then you will be even more struggling to manage aggregates, money aggregates.
I think that's right. I think I would have already argued that the big central banks really can't control inflation and employment and growth by moving interest rates up and down, or changing the quantity of money that's available in the system that they alone can print, whether it's euros, dollars, or yen. That's a very ineffective way of trying to control important drivers of the economy, and they're not working very well. If increasingly a lot of this is outside the control even of the state central banks, as we've seen with the development of private credit, with non-bank credit, that's a lot of companies and institutions who are not regulated in the banking system, who are lending money, borrowing money in a whole area. Something like, I think, probably 30% of such credit movements now are outside the control of the regulated banks, and therefore the central bank. All this means this is developing a system where it increases the real danger of financial instability. If anything should go wrong in these areas which are not under the control of the state, then there could be a serious financial reversal. And cryptocurrencies and private currencies that might flow from that are just going to be another aspect of that dangerous speculative development over the next period. One of the things central banks and governments have thought about to combat this is to introduce their own central bank currency. So you do away with banks, and you make your deposit to the central bank of your wages and so on, and it will be the central bank that will control the currency digitally, directly, without any commercial banks in between. That's been posed.
I think that, sorry to interrupt, Mike, I think that Varoufakis is in favor of this solution.
Yeah, we might be. Well, I mean, I think this is, again, a significant... It sounds good because you say, oh, well, doesn't that mean we can have more planning over the economy because the central banks will be in control of everybody's deposits and loans and so on directly, and the banks will be removed, and this might be removed, a level of speculative danger in the economy. Well, I think there's still huge dangers because currencies don't decide how economies develop. They should be an expression of how economies are developed. The central bank would still be in the position of printing money beyond the levels of value that are being created in an economy, or restricting it. And either way, that means the danger of perhaps inflation or recession. So central banks won't be able to make any real difference to that. This should be a theory that's been around for over 50 years, that the banks could be replaced by the central bank. Now, because we can digitalize things, we have the idea of central banks' digital currencies as being a solution. But even the central banks are not sure that this is the correct way to go. And it's very interesting in the Genius Act that one of the clauses in the Genius Act is that the American administration has said that the central bank can never have its own digital currency. They don't want a centralized digital currency in the hands of the state. They want to continue with this free-for-all, deregulated cryptocurrency, private sector currencies, and they don't want a central bank digital currency competing with it. But I don't believe that even if we did have that, and it became dominant in most countries, that it would solve the issues of crises and recession, which don't depend on whether the monetary policy is being operated correctly or not.
One observation, just very quickly. From a historical point of view, it seems to me that the risk of these bitcoins, stable coins, name them however you want, is that of eroding sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
And given the fact that what we call modernity politically is based on the notion and the practice of sovereignty, the moment we get away from it, what we fall into is a new form of feudalism, basically.
Well, if we do this, we're moving further and further away from human beings and their social organizations being able to plan what's going on with their resources and so on. It's becomes totally in the hands of a smaller and smaller group of mega institutions that operate in an anarchic fashion in their own interests, whether it's to gain feudal rents or whether it's simply to gain more profits by buying money and selling money in a fictitious way, whatever you want to put it in terms of. What it does mean, what cryptocurrencies mean, everybody, is that this is a further development away from the ability of human beings to control their lives and improve their conditions through productive investment, through developing things in the technology in the interests of society as a whole, and towards a completely fictitious financial casino where people every day are making all kinds of speculative decisions that could bring the financial system crashing down.
Can I go with maybe a final question? I'm still obsessed with my political economy analysis. So yeah. I was interested because what you just said about the fact that there's now basically CDBC have been forbidden by the Genius Act. And if we go back to the fact that a few years ago, the traditional financial sector lobbied against the Libra project of Zuckerberg, which was the stable coin. So my question is, what has changed in the meanwhile? So, and my hypothesis is the following. In a period of the crisis of the dollar, the Fed has accepted to bargain monetary sovereignty with a bunch of capital, which we might call tech lords just for simplicity, against the traditional capital that is not particularly happy about this. I mean, if you look at the Visa stocks in June, when the Genius Act went through, I think, Congress, I don't remember if the House or the Senate, they plummeted because clearly now there's going to be a competing issuer of money. So as the Fed basically accepted to confer some part of sovereignty to these new, let's say, tech lords or stablecoin providers, because of the role of the stablecoin in at least slowing down the crisis of the dollar via that attraction of value from abroad, in something that it can at best be a short-term arrangement, because ultimately you're basically preventing your own sovereignty, as you were just saying now. So I don't know. That's kind of like where I'm going with these ideas. But I mean,
I think that's right. But this is the reason for the banning of the central bank digital currency is simply to allow the private sector and the financial institutions and these tech companies with cash to try and make an extra buck out of the cryptocurrency situation. And there has been an attraction from abroad to buy this new development. And that's really what's behind it. They don't want state control. They're trying to reduce the state control as much as possible. But at the same time, they want the state to step in if things go wrong. So that's why they've introduced regulations for stable coins. So now the government is committed, the American administration, the government is committed to bailing out cryptocurrency and stablecoin crashes. On the other hand, they're also banned from forming their own competitive digital currency and operations as an alternative to the private sector. What could be better for finance capital in 2025?
Just as a final one, because before you said, and I totally agree with you, that you can't expect the CDBC to be a solution in themselves, because ultimately, I think if you come from a Marxist tradition, yes, money is not neutral, but it hasn't got autonomous power that can solve things as I want. So now I lost my train of thought, but yeah, sorry, I'm back. So could CDBC be thought, if not a sufficient condition, at least as a necessary condition for a management of the state that is not in the interest of the financial oligarchies, but potentially, if then used wisely, to build up some sort of like developmental state objectives, if not even a socialist society. So if it is not to be seen as a sort of like magic solution, but at least as a necessary step towards which to go.
Well, I think it's certainly possible that a single digital currency run by, in effect, the national government would be part of any planning mechanism, quite possibly in the future. The key here is always with planning, though, and the direction coming from central government is the democratization of that process. And if it's just in the hands of an elite that operates and is not hence through the democratic organizations of working people and part of the plan, then it could become more of a dictatorship over people's lives rather than something that could be used as part of the planning mechanism. Behind everything lies the abolition of the private sector, the capitalist sector, production for profit, money being made out of money, to be replaced by a planning mechanism where common ownership, where working people organize through common ownership to maximize the potential of technologies. And part of that planning mechanism could also mean direct control over the monetary system rather than going through intermediaries of a bunch of banks.
Paolo, do you have anything else to ask, or?
No. I've exhausted my questions, at least for now.
I'm certainly exhausted. Thanks for
Exactly. We don't want to take advantage of your presence too much, Michael. I think it was really useful, and hopefully it's going to be useful also for our viewers to have some more clarity in understanding stablecoin, cryptocurrencies. It's not the same thing. And
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you very much, man.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Bye bye.
Bye, Mike. Bye, Carlo.
Ciao, Paolo.